We're just waiting for Melissa, and we'll get started with the hiring process. Melissa, are you there? Fran and Lynn started to review the hiring process again. Fran, just right there. Oh my God.
Yeah, Fran's there.
I'm here.
Okay, I was like, I lost everybody again. And we just had some minor issues to work through. We also deleted some repetition that was happening. But, and Fran, you correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the process that we put in that in the last couple rounds we have felt has been very valuable is making sure that we have the face-to-face, both Kyle and Fran and I, after the committee does their work, so we can go over the pros, the cons, or anything that could come up. And then after I meet with the candidate, I'm really trying to use the 24-hour rule to get back to them before I say, okay, I'm going to move this person forward. But we really tried to spell it out as far as what's an internal candidate and how the process goes. And we did find kind of through some investigation that we didn't have one full system that would give every internal candidate and external candidate a way to get the postings. So Sarah's now sending that out to everyone who within the last calendar year was a coach of ours, because that's what internal means to us. And so we've come up with what we shared out. I think I shared it out last week. And Fran, am I missing anything?
No, I think this was over the course of 7 months and feedback from Kyle and I to Lynn and just discussions, and then Lynn and I connecting last week to kind of polish this document up with something that Kyle and I could live with, and especially something that she could live with, to kind of give us some guidelines and parameters to focus the committee work and validate the committee work while still having clear guidelines about what Lynn is expecting for the processes for us to follow with coaches. So I think it's good. I think that Kyle, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he thinks it's good as well. He and I connected going through it. I don't know if there's specific questions or if you want Lynn and I to go through the actual document or what have you.
I don't think it's necessary to go through the document. Does anyone have any specific questions?
I had a couple comments that Fran and I worked through, which I know that the board president has asked a couple times, what are the qualifications? And so, Fran, if you want to talk a little bit to that process. And also, I think it is worth noting that any modified coach or JV coach has a very different expectation as far as the process than a varsity coach does for reasons that we've all lived through in the past 365 days. But if you want to talk about how the qualifications are handled, Fran.
Yeah. So I'm referencing the document and what we included and then what we chose not to include. So right on the, if you're all, I only see that Mike's on it and Lynn. I'll give you a second, but what I've done is I've highlighted just to, there we go. There's a few, there we go.
Got it.
So I've highlighted under item 2, just some of the qualifications that we're considering for the position. And really, they're in no specific order, but just kind of the things and the charge of what the committees would be looking at. Obviously, first and foremost is they have to be certified and the requirements around that. If they're not, what steps they're going to take to do that. And Sarah and Kyle are experts on where we've we struggled a little bit over the years, and people saying, yeah, I'll get this, and then it takes a little longer than they had planned. All right, Sarah, right, Kyle? Although it's been buttoned up much better in the past couple of years. And then those other items, and Kyle, I don't know if you want to speak to some of those as well.
Yeah, no, I think it just provided us some guidance. Obviously, as Fran alluded to, there's the certification requirements, whether they're a certified teacher or they're a non-teacher coach. So making sure they have all that stuff met for the New York State education guidelines for coaches, and then obviously in line with our athletic mission, vision, and values, we want to make sure that they're meeting that, and obviously look at the amount of experience that we would prefer depending on the level, whether it's a modified JV or varsity position, the type of experience that we're looking for, and then that we use a fair and equitable process in terms of the questions we're asking all the candidates, and what are whether it's the committee structure, the varsity, or the sub varsity levels, that we're maintaining that process.
Yeah, one of the things that, in regards to qualifications, that Lynn and I spoke specifically about is, I don't know if there was a request on the postings to have the qualifications listed, and Lynn and I talked about that, and we don't necessarily drill down that deep on our postings for even teachers. We will put preferences for certification, and some positions we may internally have a discussion and say, well, we want a minimal preference of years of experience, but that really hasn't been something that we've done with the coaching postings, that these qualifications go on that. And Lynn, what was the second point that you wanted me to cover?
Just the idea that how the committee comes together, it's a little bit more formal and larger for the varsity coaches.
Yeah, so this document best embodies the past practices and our current practices. Is that and I don't mean this in a negative way in any way, shape, or form, for the sub-level positions. Kyle and I, and our current practices for the sub-level positions, that means everything but head varsity coaches. For those sub-level positions, it's been the athletic director and that head varsity coach conducting a process, and then having conversations with me, and then that recommendation goes to Lynn, and this document affords Lynn the ability to have a sit down or a formal interview based on that recommendation from me for those sub-level positions. Again, that word sub is not negative. It's just to differentiate between the two. Mm-hmm. For the head varsity, the non-sub level, for the head varsity positions, which each sport has one, we would have this formal committee process that I would be directly involved in with Kyle. And then that committee process would arrive at recommendations to Lynn. And then Lynn has the discretion with this document outlines to have her process. Is that what you were looking for, Lynn?
Yeah. One of the questions that has come up in the past too is the committee charge. So, when I've made a decision that has been not what the committee recommended, it's become more and more evident to me that the committee believes that their time and their process results in a decision that should be like completely accepted. And in most times it is, but other times when one candidate comes, another candidate comes, that when I make that final decision. So I did add in this that the interview committee really needs to understand their charge, that they are an advisory committee to the principal, and that the principal then takes that recommendation to the superintendent, but that the superintendent considers the recommendation, has that sit down with the AD and the principal, then meets with the candidate, but has maybe the flexibility, and the process here outlines that if that candidate, there's something just not happening, that I'm feeling it, I can ask for the second candidate or the third candidate to come in, and then I will go back to the principal and the AD to say what I saw. And I think that charge, and the fact that it's not the committee, and Fran and I talked a lot about, not a lot, but enough about, well, Lynn, I'm part of the committee, but ultimately the committee should be making the recommendation to the principal, and the principal should be making it to the superintendent. And we have clarified that in this process.
Okay.
I felt that was best, instead of coming up with an arbitrary number of 2 or 3, that, we're sending, no matter what the process, we're sending our top candidate. And then if Lynn, through her discretion as the boss and the superintendent, says, okay, committee or principal, or I don't agree with that top choice, I met with that person, X, Y, and Z are my concerns, and we have that discussion, then she goes to the next candidate, if there is one. And then if that doesn't result in a hire, then she goes to the next one. But we've built in safeguards where those conversations are occurring throughout that period, instead of an arbitrary number of you must.
Yeah, you have to come up with 3.
Yeah. So back and forth conversation. I mean, I'm glad that you guys came together on this and came up with a great process. And hopefully we've learned from past experiences and what we're looking for and what we're expecting from this process. So good job, guys.
Can I just add one thing? And this doesn't need to be like in the process, but I think there's an opportunity, because I noticed, I think in a couple of the last couple of hiring, prime hirings where there were issues, there was, I think, a misperception outside of the committee and outside of maybe the board and the administration as to the role of the committee. And I think there might be an opportunity, when we do have like another varsity hiring, to make a communication widely about the role of the committee, so that that misperception is not there. I talked to several people who were like, "Oh, I thought that was the hiring committee." I think that within the district, and when I say district, I mean, employees, parents, whoever else, they perceived the committee as the hiring committee. And I think there's an opportunity just to educate around that.
Okay. Basically, I guess if another opportunity arises when we're going through this process again, I guess what you're saying is just make it known.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
Charge of the committee.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I would agree with that.
Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda. Are we
Okay.
okay
Yes,
with this?
Melissa.
Is there anything else with this?
Melissa,
Yes, I hear you.
can I ask one question?
Sure.
Back to the hiring process. When we had this meeting, I think probably 2 months ago, there was some discussion about having an ability to have parents or outsiders have input into the process. Any concerns with what the coaching qualifications would be? What were the thoughts on that?
I think we talked about it in regards
I'm
to
not saying I'm
moving
in favor or
forward,
against it, but
but not each individual hire. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I think what we spoke about, people were wondering, how do student athletes, parents, community members, their values, or feedback, put into how we hire. And so we talked about, our athletics mission, vision, and values. When we created them, part of it was talking about, the area of coaching. What are the qualities that we're looking for? What are the outcomes that we want out of our student athletes? So as we develop that vision and that filter, we're incorporating the community's values in terms of our athletic outcomes, what we want from a coach, what we want the student athlete to learn and do. So we felt that was incorporated one. Then kind of another layer, as we talked about, is when we do have an opening and we gave some examples of how it's occurred in the past. You know, Fran and I are more than willing to talk to people on the phone, email with them. In particular, we prefer to meet with them in person, and we've had conversations when there have been openings about what are the qualities that that parent would like to see in our next hire. You know, but we're also clear and careful that, you know, we're not going down the road of, well, I want person X over person Y. We didn't go down that road. We went over, what is it that you want to see in the new coach, you know, because there's an opening here, and getting that feedback, and what is it, you know, that you may be concerned about, you know, related to those things. So
I would think what we would be looking for in each individual coach or each individual sport would be the same across the board in regards to, you know, values, in regards to, you know, certain aspects that I think would apply across the board, regardless of the sport, regardless of the coach. So I was kind of, I thought it was more like you were saying, Kyle, more of a general athletics department. You know, where are we looking to go? What kind of values do you look for in a coach? What sort of things are you looking for coaches in general? And we would apply that to the overall look of the hiring process or each individual hire. But of course, getting feedback along the way from community members, I feel is important as well.
I think to get the buy-in from, you know, the folks that have come to our athletic committees, I think what they're looking for is us to, you know, survey the folks in that sport and say, hey, we're about to go out to hire, you know, a JV or varsity coach. You know, what are the characteristics? And then we know that. And when Kyle, you come to me or you go to the committee, and then Fran says, listen, this person has what they talked about, you know, some experience, and they've shown, you know, X, Y, and Z as far as character and motivation, and that's why we're standing behind this recommendation. I think it gets a lot of buy-in from the stakeholders. They might not need to be on they don't need to be on the committee, but they know, you know, what they want in a coach.
So just to be clear, so if there's an open position prior to vetting the candidates, just throwing out a general, we're looking for a coach, getting buy-in and feedback from community each time.
So we haven't really discussed that. That wasn't part of Lynn and my discussion, and we don't currently have a mechanism in place that does that. And are we talking sub levels or all levels or just head varsity levels? So I would say, you know, perhaps we can discuss a little. Lynn, Kyle, and I can talk more about that and what that's looked like in the past when we've solicited that feedback from parents and student athletes. And you know, a lot of times we have one candidate apply for a position, you know, so we also have to be able to have the discretion that when it's needed or when it's relevant or so I'm asking for a little more time before we get too far in the weeds with this topic about engaging with the families and the kids and the parents about the qualifications or what they're looking for. We will develop something that we will use. Just a little more time to work on that, I guess is what we're saying.
And it sounds like it's got to be something that's fluid. You know, it's not something that's standardized. Like you said, if you have one candidate, you know, it doesn't have to be something that we do each time. Okay. Anything else on the hiring process? No? All right. The next is the football merger. Kyle and Fran, update us on that.
Yep. So the Adirondack League football schools had a meeting on April 21st that included all of the superintendents and ADs of schools that have football or are part of a merger participating in football. You know, the purpose was to discuss mergers in the future of football for our league. It was a really good conversation that focused on, you know, providing quality and developmentally appropriate football opportunities for all of the student athletes, not just at our school, but within our league. You know, there was conversations about what are currently happening, what ones potentially could be out there, what schools maybe looking for a merger. We talked about kind of the regional approach to a merger and how you would merge and what makes sense for student athletes in terms of travel and logistics, and the practical pieces. There was a discussion even about 8-man football, and all of that, and really trying to be forward thinking and talking about the long term approach to football, not just at Lake George, but within our league and within our region. So it was a great conversation, and we are merged with Hadley Luzerne, and we're committed to that merger. They're committed to that merger. They're looking at ways to provide more student athletes than they are. But within that, we recognize our enrollment, as we've talked about, is shrinking. And to continue to provide those opportunities, we are having conversations and looking at expanding that merger. And one of the schools that we are talking with and about that is Corinth. So we are at the very beginning of conversations looking at a Lake George, Hadley Luzerne, and Corinth three-way merger, possibly beginning in 2021, which would be at the earliest, which would be next fall. So some important things to note here. First, this process and the discussions will likely take place September, October, November, and all of the schools will be looking for some board action, a resolution, which is needed for mergers by December in order to meet the league and section deadline. In addition to that, the tentative plan is that the ADs, so myself and the ADs from those schools, will coordinate to make a presentation that would, first be vetted by the superintendents, would be shared internally, and then eventually would be shared publicly. And then we need to coordinate what that's going to look like at the schools. We don't want to be making a presentation in September about this when Hadley's going to present in October, November. So the important part is we're still working out the internal details, and the success of coordinating mergers and ensuring accurate information is shared with concurrently with all the schools and communities is really important, because we've seen mergers not go through because rumors get out there and inaccurate information gets out there. So I would say at this time, I don't think we're ready yet to take this out to our community, but we wanted to let the board know, as we had conversations at this committee level before, we're looking at our current merger.
We're being recorded.
Yep. So as I said, we're looking at that merger, and we're having those internal discussions at this time and investigating the possibilities is what I wanted to be clear about. And as there's more to update to the board and the community, we will.
Kyle, I have a question for you. Now, us joining with Corinth, that makes us a three-way merger. That puts us to a Class A?
No, it would depend on our beds number, so our enrollment of the three schools, and there's a formula for that. Likely, it would make us a C school, which is where we have been. This year, we're going to be a D, but usually we're on that cusp of a C to D. And again, like I say, that to be clear, it's a potential three-way merger, and we're having early discussions internally, amongst the schools at this time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kyle. And when's your next meeting with them? How's this progressing within the next couple of months?
So obviously with this whole, school shutdown, a lot of the folks have been there, but I would anticipate over the next couple of months, I'd be coordinating with the ADs from the other schools. We'd be getting back with the superintendents and of those schools and getting some plans together like I said, the key is to concurrently roll this out. So whatever it is that we're going to do, it would be happening the same way or on a similar timeline at the other schools to make sure that the information as it's going out is accurate and being said the same way and being done at the same times. So, like I said, in terms of publicly, at a board meeting, I would think sometime in the fall, September, October, November, it would need to be being discussed publicly, because timeline wise, the latest you could do a board resolution would be December, because you have to have it to the league for review by January and to the section for review by February. So
Okay.
the timeline for mergers.
All right. Does anyone have any comments, questions?
Melissa, to that point, I think and Kyle, I don't know if you would say if this makes sense, but I mean, as a committee, I would think that we would want to be reviewing that and making some recommendation in the November timeline. I don't think it's something you want to do during the season, probably. Make an announcement like that and to make a vote on something like that during an ongoing season. But at knowing the constraints of the section, I think it probably would behoove us to do that earlier than later.
Yeah, Tim, one of the concerns that we raised as a league at the section level is that the timelines that they have for the merger committee, specifically for football, requires that schools are having merger discussions while the season is going on. As you pointed out, that has some issues. But as of right now, those deadlines haven't changed. So yes, I think,
But I think we could do back channel discussions, not fully right out in public session.
More public stuff in November as the season concluded. Yeah, I think that's probably, a November, kind of November timeline where the information is shared. There's the time for feedback and questions, and then the resolution or actions would look to take place in December, with a January league review, with a February section review. That's kind of the timeline.
Okay. All right. Good point, Tim. Thank you. All right. Next item is the thought exchange. Lynn, what do you have to tell us about thought exchange?
Nothing, just that we were going to send it out. I just sent one out about engagement, how are things going for the whole community. But we had talked about sending one out for athletics at one point a while ago, and then all of this happened. Under the premise, we had one to go that Fran, Tim, I believe Kyle was at that meeting. I think you were there too. That's already in the queue about, listen, we have a declining enrollment and we're having a hard time filling our rosters. Before we make any type of decisions about any programming, let's hear from our constituents. And I don't think right this week, but maybe after this thought exchange goes out, maybe you schedule it for 2 weeks as something different to talk about other than COVID and everything else, and say, hey, we're planning to be back, and we've got a lot of decisions to make, and we have we're having some challenges around filling our rosters. And at some point, the principal and the AD and myself are going to have to make recommendations. And is there something we're not thinking of?
So we have this again to utilize until June, correct?
I want to get it out in June. We're hoping to get it at a different rate with sharing it with other districts, but right now, our specific contract will end.
Yeah.
So Kyle and I talked a little about this topic, anticipating that it would come up, obviously, at the meeting. And kind of going back to our plan is, when we left this committee, our next step was to engage with the students and talk with the wider student body about this question. And just obviously a concern with everyone, and their focus is scattered in 20 million different directions. And the fact that we kind of we had some good momentum towards this topic, and we had the coaches. Kyle, I think we were at meeting number 4 with them. Remember, we had a whole very clear path with engaging with the coaches, and then the coaches' feedback was about, we got to engage with the wider student body, and we were about to do that, and then
this happened.
This all happened. So I don't know if it might be in our best interest to throw something like that out to the wider community, especially in the world that we're in right now, without having done some foundational work with the students and the student athletes. Because my concern is, how it would be interpreted and received. If we haven't done that back work and that foundational work with our student athletes, they may interpret it as through a different lens, and I just worry about that. I have a concern about that. If we haven't preset the kids,
what are you concerned about? Like, to what specifically? What?
That their sport's going to be cut, or that we're not going to field teams in the fall. I
think we need to communicate. I mean, it feels like we need to communicate. I mean, that's a real possibility. If the numbers aren't there, we may not be able to field the sport
for the fall.
Yeah. I mean, we've had several sports that have already been in that position. So yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, I don't want to alarm anybody to say, we're cutting your sport, but we need to phrase that in a way that lets people know what the issue is. And we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that these opportunities are available to our students. And in some way we need information and answers, and in a lot of ways we need your help in these things.
Well,
yeah, and
I
hear what you're saying.
Can't hear you, Melissa.
Can't hear you.
Maybe, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Moving. Okay. What about narrowing? We can narrowing our focus. I don't know. Am I on okay? No.
Yeah, I could kind of piece together. If I could piece together what you said, because it was very choppy, but I got the general gist of perhaps narrowing the focus to just the exiting seniors, more or less like a senior exit interview about athletics.
Yes.
I think that's a great idea, and I'd like a little time with Kyle and Lynn to talk further about that, like a exit senior thing. I don't know if Thought Exchange would be the best vehicle to do that. Maybe Lynn could speak further to that. Depending.
I have some pretty, and you'll have to I apologize, but I have some pretty strong views on this. I've gotten some great reviews about Thought Exchange. I've been here almost 4 years. I know that people have been here longer, but I think we've kicked this can long enough. I think we have to learn how to be better at being smaller. And I think that this is the time. I mean, if there's any time to be using technology and to be using a tool that we've invested in, it's now. And it's our upperclassmen, and senior interviews are great. That's the great way to maybe follow up on it. But if you guys want data to make decisions, you use the tool that the nation is using, and one of those is thought exchange. That does not supplant the discussions. That does not supplant why we would do that. But we've got kids at home for hours on the time that are not doing anything, and parents, and we've got challenges in front of us, and business has to continue. And I really support the idea before this tool goes away to utilize it, to use it, to use it and use the data we have. And we've given both Kyle and Fran that leeway a couple months ago, many months ago, to go out and meet with the coaches. I don't know what you've heard from them, but we need their ideas, because we are going to go into another season without getting their ideas. And now we need more time. I just heard from Fran, and this is very respectful. I don't know how much more time we need to be able to ask our kids. We're a district that prides itself on student voice, guys. We are a leader in me, and student voice to me is probably the reason I'm doing this. And if we don't ask our students and the folks that support us or not, I think that we're missing a huge opportunity before this tool goes away.
Let me be very clear. I wasn't saying to not ask our students, and again, nobody anticipated being at a school for 7 weeks. It kind of derailed our plan to involve student voice in this discussion. So I don't believe that I wasn't saying that we're not going to solicit information on this topic from our students. And, we certainly would welcome that and want that information, most definitely want that information. We had a plan, it got derailed. This is really the first conversation we're having about it since that. And if Lynn wants to do a thought exchange around athletics to the students and parents, then that's what we're going to do, and we'll do it. I just want to be thoughtful in what we're collecting. I don't want to just do it because we're losing thought exchange in June. I want to do it because we're going to use it to make informed decisions, and that we're collecting the appropriate information from what we want from parents and students. So a senior exit might look much different than declining enrollment, and what we'd ask parents might look much different than what we'd ask 7th through 11th grade and declining enrollment and sports. And, we're kind of talking about 3 different things. So yes, no, maybe in the middle.
Yeah, so it warrants further discussion, and
Yes.
You guys get together and decide the best course, but just keeping in mind the time frame that we have to work in. So I get what Fran's saying, I get what Lynn's saying. Let's have a middle ground and try to move something forward. And like I kind of agree, we're paying for it. We might as well try to put something out before we lose it in June. But it has to be done with sensitivity and focus, like Fran said. So, I mean, if you guys can get together and kind of fine tune that, that would be great.
Excellent.
Okay. Yep. All right, guys. And then the final thing, which I hope we're going to come up with some good ideas here, the senior athletes, celebrations, how we're going to honor our senior athletes. I mean, it's this year didn't turn out as planned. And what can we do to honor the great seniors that we have?
So we already have a number of things in the works. So I'll go through them and then open it up for questions. One is we have senior athlete posters. So the Booster Club started a project this year, and we just completed tracking down the spring senior information and getting those posters made. The posters are going to be displayed along the fence line on 9L, the girls' soccer field there, at the elementary school starting tomorrow afternoon. And the plan is to have the posters up there for a couple of weeks. And then we will take the posters down and display them at the Senior Sports Awards. And then the boosters plan to give the posters to the seniors after the ceremony to commemorate their careers. And the posters are really, really nice. It's, maybe a 3-foot poster by 2 foot. It has the big photo of the senior athlete. It says senior along the side and the sports they played at the bottom. You may have seen them in the gym. If you're in the gym this winter, we got the project kind of launched with the winter athletes. So there's going to be over 60 posters. We have about 60 senior athletes.
Wow.
So as you can imagine, that'll look really neat. We had to kind of find an area where we could display them outside all together. We're going to do some promotion, on the school social media and those pieces, letting the athletes and the families know that those are up there, and so they can kind of drive by and see them. They can get out and take photos with them, and just honoring all of the senior athletes. So that's one of the items we're doing. The spring senior athletes, we especially are kind of feeling for them in terms of they never got their senior night, and that's a kind of a rite of passage and something a lot of them look forward to. So I work with the varsity coaches for the spring sports. We came up with an idea. We have these really nice framed varsity letters on order. They have a nice gold plaque at the bottom with the student's name and some information. We're hoping that those come in the next couple of weeks. And we're waiting, kind of on guidance of what we're allowed to do. But the idea right now is that when we're able to, the coaches will present those in person to those senior athletes and to the parents, kind of the way they would on that senior night, where they talk about that senior and have that special moment. And one of the ideas is that the coaches would go, when and if allowed, to the athlete's home, present it to the athlete, talk about the athlete as they would at the senior night with the parents there, and we'd capture that on video. So we'd be doing it in person. And then what we would do is we'd be putting all the videos together to share out with the broader team, because it's kind of, that senior night is usually that moment, right? So it's the moment where we recognize the senior athlete and the parents, which we want to do in person. But then there's a broader audience there that usually kind of hears about each senior and has those moments. So kind of combining the in-person with social distancing and the CDC guidelines, and kind of getting it to the broader group. So that's the idea that's out there right now, and we're kind of waiting on the approvals to make that happen and for those framed letters to come in. But we want to make sure that the spring senior athletes get that recognition, that senior night ceremony, if you will, for their spring sport. In addition to that, annually we host our senior sports awards banquet, and that is going to look different than it has in years past, but we are committed to commemorating those senior athletes. And again, we're working on some plans to be able to do that in person if the situation allows. At that ceremony, each senior gets a commemorative plaque that the Booster Club buys. Joel Marcelletti and Adirondack Sports Journal puts those together. They're really, really nice plaques that commemorates the career from freshman through senior year and all the sports that they played. We have special department awards that I met with the varsity coaches on today that we present at that ceremony. We usually do a photo slideshow. We have a video montage of all the senior athletes that we'll be putting together, and celebrating the senior athletes and their families. So we're working on those items to kind of get all that put together and make sure that we honor these senior athletes in the way that they deserve.
Wow, you're a lot further ahead than I thought. That's great. It's a lot of wonderful things in the works. Anyone have anything to add or say anything about what's planned this far? New?
How are you going to communicate that to the families? That was just an item I've seen repeated in the recent thought exchange. So,
Sorry, which one, Lynn?
the senior how you're going to put the posters up and things? Are you thinking that you'll communicate that?
Yep. So the plan is for the posters to go up tomorrow. I'm going to be up getting those together with Kim Zilm from the Booster Club. We'll get them all up. Then what we'll do is we'll take a bunch of photos, kind of showing them up there, and going to get those to you and Tara Sullivan, and Tara, asking Tara to put it out on the school Facebook page, on the school Twitter. Obviously, I'll put it out on that Twitter. I'm going to send it out, to all the coaches. We also have like an email blast, an email group for just athletic folks. So we'll send it specifically to all the senior athletes' families, and obviously we want the broader community to know that's there too. So we're gonna kind of use our social media power and our email groupings, kind of get the word out. I think it's going to be a really nice thing that people are going to, drive by and see, and all those posters lined up. They look great on, again, if you've seen, there's probably like 25 of them hung in the gym, right? And if you can imagine, we're going to have, 50 or 60 of them along that nice long fence line there by the Elm School. I think it'll look really sharp, and hopefully, be something that the seniors, and the families like. And then beyond that, one of the kids said, well, what are they going to do with those, at the end of the year? And I said, the booster is going to give them to you, and the kid lit up like, oh my God, I'm hanging that in my room. Like, that'd be so cool. Yeah,
that'll be nice.
Nice.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Fran.
And obviously, whatever based on Cuomo's dial and New York pause, wherever we are in late June, might also determine some other things. So,
Yeah.
We shall see.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Did anyone send any emails, any community members, any questions?
No, they didn't. It doesn't look like anyone other than us 8 were included in on this.
I almost was included on it, but I'm glad I got on.
Tom's not going to be included in the end of it. He's going, oh, there he is.
Uh-oh.
It's the perfect ending to this meeting.
Breaking out, Melissa.
What's that? Hear me? Anybody?
That was well
Did
said.
you guys see the Saturday Night Live meeting thing? Did you guys see that clip about people in a meeting, the WebEx, and getting locked out? All right, never mind. Can you hear me now? So basically, follow up would be for
Giving us a tour of her house.
I'm thinking if I move around, I might be able to. Can you hear me now? Can you hear?
It's interesting.
I feel like an idiot here. So for the next follow-up, finalizing the thought exchange, since we're kind of limited on how much longer we have it, and then more information on the football merger as it comes along, right, Kyle?
correct.
All right. Anything else, guys, before I lose reception again?
Good job.
All right, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks.
All right, take care. Stay
Yep.
safe, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.